Welcome to the Darkstream. I'm VoxDay, VoxDay.blogspot.com, and Infogalactic News. Tonight I'm not really in the mood to talk much about politics and ideology and all that sort of thing. What some of you may or may not realize is that in addition to being an author, I'm also an editor and of a publishing house called Castelia House. And we publish a lot of books, both fiction and nonfiction. And one of the interesting things about being an editor is it really changes your perspective on how the different writers write. Okay, when you read something only as a reader, you tend to look at things in a different way than you do when you are, just reading for pleasure versus when you are reading for editing. And a lot of writers will tell you, just like a lot of musicians will tell you, it's sometimes hard to even relax and enjoy stuff that you're just reading for pleasure or whatever. Right now I've been reading Jerusalem by Alan Moore, the guy who created Watchmen, and it's kind of funny because there's greatness in the book there. There's definitely some real imagination, some real depth of thought there. But it's also crippled by his teleology and his reliance upon some of sort of the standard bag of tricks that a lot of authors have in this postmodern age. It's kind of like when you're reading an E.N.M. Banks novel. I tend to prefer Banks's non-science fiction to his science fiction as a general rule. And the thing is, at some point in time, before too long, there's going to be a dog turd. Before too long, there's going to be an abandoned pornographic magazine somewhere. And Moore, somewhat to my surprise, is even more inclined to rolling around in what, for lack of a better term, we'll just call the filth of the world. They do it in I think an attempt to root the book and connect the book to what they consider to be the negative realities of life. But what they are generally unable to do, even when they try, Banks does not try, Moore does try. And that's why I find Moore interesting. Moore actually does strive for the eternal. He does strive for the beautiful. And he does manage to do some stuff that's very interesting. There's a point towards the end of the book where he sets up sort of he frames it as a play, and it's kind of it's a bit of a play on Waiting for Godot, if I have that pronunciation correct. One of the downsides of being a reader is you never know the correct pronunciation for things. My wife sometimes gives me a hard time because I'm constantly mispronouncing various things, and I pointed out to her that that's really denigrating her and all my friends, not me. I mean, at least I know what the word is and I can use it appropriately. I know what it means, but I've never heard any of them use it. So anyhow, She wasn't buying it, but so anyhow, yeah. The thing is, there's this section, this play section, and Samuel Beckett is talking to John Clare and some of these historical figures, and one of the things that's interesting about Jerusalem is it's really an elegy for the England that Moore senses is being lost. It's an elegy for a neighborhood. I don't know if he's actually from the boroughs of Northampton or not. I haven't bothered looking into it. But if he isn't, he's certainly done a magnificent job of research on that area historically. But the thing is, so I'm reading this section, and it's a really interesting section. There's some interesting philosophical concepts. There's some interesting characters. There's some interesting dialogue. There's even a little bit of humor, and so forth. And at a certain point, there's even some pathos. But once it dives into the whole, the guy's confession of committing incest with his daughter to his wife, and then her realizing that she's somehow culpable because she hasn't paid any attention to him in that way for 12 years and so forth. I mean, you're just like, what is this obsession? What is this need to roll in the filth? I mean, I swear, some of these authors, they're like, it's like when you're out with your dog on a walk and you see a dead fish lying next to the river and you're like, stop, no, because the dog's going to go and roll in it, and I mean, George R.R. Martin is the same way. Stephen King is the same way. I mean, and these are the good writers. Oh, Banks is horrible about that. I would say that The Wasp Factory is one of the 2 worst books I have ever read in my entire life. It's terrible. I mean, if you want to read a transcript of my debate with an SJW who's a Banks fan, you might find it interesting, because he didn't have any response at all to my criticisms. I can't remember. I'm so bitter about it. I actually threw the book away. I'm so bitter about it. It was a Shadowrun book. It was a Shadowrun book, and there was this whole this guy goes off and has this whole sort of adventure, and then it's just back in his desk on Monday morning like nothing happened. And so that was bad enough. I mean, that was just not good. But what did me in was when somebody goes out and there's this trailer home or something, some sort of mobile home, and there's this whole build-up. He sees the girl he loves, and she's framed in the doorway, and the guy spends half a page trying to build up the way that he looks and he sees her, and the way she looks in the door frame, and her hair, and what she's wearing, and all this sort of thing. And then the very next sentence, suddenly she gets blown up by a flying elf firing a bazooka at her. It's so incongruous. I mean, I wasn't expecting that. I mean, it was so bad. It makes me laugh now. It was so bad. And I couldn't, and then of course the very next thing is, rage. I mean, clearly the guy thought that this was really gonna, this was really powerful and was really gonna make the reader, feel the rage and the anger. It didn't work at all. So, anyhow, I don't know the name of that book. It was in the Shadowrun series. It was terrible. Um, and so, anyhow, there's certain books that are just, but see, the thing is, with the Shadowrun book, it's just bad. That's somebody who's not a good writer. What's annoying with Banks, and what's annoying with Moore, and what's annoying with all those decent writers, those good writers, is that it's like the dog that you like, and he just won't stop rolling in dead things. And now, obviously, if you've read my epic fantasy, A Magic Broken was actually the working title for it was The Treasure in the Whore's Mouth, and the publisher nixed that one. So and if you've read A Sea of Skulls, you'll know that it begins with a absolutely savage, absolutely horrific scene. And I don't make any apologies for that, because it fits what the story needs to say. And then on a meta level, of course, since I've said openly that the Selenoth series is kind of an answer to George R.R. Martin, I'm basically showing George, no, this is what rape looks like. It's not this tee-hee-hee, she was raped by 97 women, and we have no idea who the father is now. Martin is a really socio-sexually weird, creepy guy. I mean, that's the other thing about editing, is you get to know the authors, who the authors are, through their writing. It is very, very difficult for authors to conceal who they are. They can do it in a book or two. I'm not saying that, if you read a paragraph from this, you'll know all about the author. I'm not saying that at all. What I'm saying is, if you read enough books by an author, you will have a very good sense of, where they are, if they're men, where they are socio-sexually, ranking-wise. You'll have a very good idea of how intelligent they are. You'll have a very good idea about how educated they are. And you'll also have a pretty good idea of their moral character. And so, that's one thing that really struck me about reading the Ice and Fire books, is just what a train wreck of a creature George Martin is. And so, somebody said to, like, one thing that I'm working on, somebody said to me, can you write a character who's not really intelligent? He said, I really like reading your books. It's fun, it's cool. But where all the characters, they're very interesting and all that, so they're all so smart. And I realized that was a flaw. That was a weakness. That was not a good thing. You want to range the full. You want the full range of human endeavor and emotion and so forth. You don't want to limit it to a set. I don't understand the question. What if somebody wants to fight me because of what I said? I don't follow. Sorry. So anyhow, Oscar Wilde, he had a way with words that very few men in history have had. So anyhow, I'm not too worried about people wanting to fight me. I spent 6 years doing martial arts contact, so it would be the first time I got my butt kicked. Anyhow, I mean, heck, at my age now, I played fairly high level soccer, and by high level I mean guys who when they were younger were playing against Real Madrid and Barcelona. I come home And my wife is like, did they just spend the last hour and a half beating you up? You know? So, anyhow, but what I wanted to talk about tonight is we have a new book out. Well, it's not really new out, but it is we've finally got the paperback out. And I highly, highly recommend reading it because John C. Wright, in my estimation, is one of the top 3 authors currently writing in science fiction and fantasy today. You know, a lot of people have had some very kind things to say about my work. You know, they've compared it favorably to George Martin. They've compared it disfavorably to J.R.R. Tolkien. Either way, I'm very happy with that. But what I can tell you, absolutely, is that John C. Wright is a much, much better writer than I am. I mean, you know, he just turned in a new book. The 5th book in the Moth and Cobweb series is going to be coming out very soon as we get the cover done. And it is actually demoralizing as a writer. It's great as a publisher, but it's very demoralizing as a writer because, you know, he writes so fast and so well. You know, the opening of the Moth and Cobweb books, a lot of people don't realize this, but the first book, The Green Knight Squire, began in a totally different way. A totally different way. And I didn't like it. I thought it was not very interesting and kind of pointless. And it didn't really convey the tone that I thought it should. So I called him up. I said, hey, John, you know, I think you should do something different here. I said, I think you should throw out the whole first 2 chapters, do something different. I said, you know, do something that's a little bit ominous. I said, you know, kind of like use The Dark is Rising by Susan Cooper as a model. You know, not something that's like over the top scary or something, but just something that is sort of making the reader going, you know, what's going on? This is kind of strange. And he turns, if you've read the book, and you should, The Green Knight Squire, that first chapter is called The 13th Hour, and it's creepy and it's strange and it's eldritch and it's really, really cool, and it's a fantastic beginning, not just to the book but to the whole series. Now here's the thing, I mean, that's all great, like, you know, you hear that and you go, wow, nice job, Vox. You know, you did a good job editing it, right? You know, so you would think that I would be all like, you know, pleased with myself about this and that sort of thing. But here's the demoralizing part. John sent it to me the next day. Okay, you know, I come up with the oh, you should do some of this, and he comes in and sends me something better than pretty much anything I've ever written, and he did it in about 12 hours. So yeah, that's kind of demoralizing. So, but anyhow, this book is really, really good. It's a collection of related short stories. It's called City Beyond Time: Tales of the Fall of Metachronopolis, and it's classic John Wright. It is possibly the most brilliant perspective on time travel that has ever been written or conceived. And what's interesting about it, Metachronopolis is the city beyond time. And there's the city is basically these masters of time, time lords, if you will, and they can bring people from different times, different points in history, and they can bring them in and basically have them as toys. I mean, we can get the ebook at Castelia, I think. This is the paperback just came out, and so that's why I'm showing it to you here. But this is not actually necessarily this is neither the first book nor the best book of John Wright's that I would recommend. I do think it's actually a great place to start with John, because it's like I said, it's a series of short stories. John is one of those deep and thick writers, dense writers. And so, for some people, City Beyond Time is probably a easier step into it. But the two books, his best books, in my opinion, are number one, The Golden Age, which we don't publish. I can't show it to you because I only have the ebook. Tor publishes it. But The Golden Age is fantastic. It's much more big science fiction. I wouldn't say space opera, but there's a reason why when it was published, Publishers Weekly basically said, this is a major talent to watch, and they were correct. However, the books that are my favorite, or the book that is my favorite, and the one that I would highly recommend that everyone read, is this one, Awake in the Nightland. This book is one of the few books. I mean, I would say that this is one of the. Yeah, we need to get the audiobook out, don't we? This is one of the best books published in the last 25 years, without a doubt. And if you like Lovecraft, if you like that sort of ominous type thing, this will go beyond what you imagine. If you read the reviews of it sometime, I mean, some of the reviews we put on the back, I felt something like, there's nothing else like it. Divinely inspired. How does one review or critique something like this? One does not critique the great works of literature. One appreciates them. Good and bad do not apply to them. Awake in the Nightland is one of the finest books of any type in any genre I have ever read. And then this one, it says, the sum exceeds the parts. It's a masterpiece made from smaller masterpieces. And the thing is that it's kind of funny because the three story, it's basically four connected novellas. They're not short stories. They're a bit longer. And what's interesting about it is that it's actually set in the world of the Nightland, which was created by an author named William Hope Hodgson, back around in the 1920s. And so Wright borrowed the setting and then wrote these stories in it. And it's definitely a case of this exceeding the original. And so, but what's funny about it is like the first three novellas are more or less standard stories. The fourth one is vintage big Wright, which means it's huge in scope, huge in scale, totally confusing, mind-blowing, but it's not necessarily what I would consider particularly enjoyable. And then it has one of the best, most powerful endings of a book that you'll ever read. It's that good. And so, anyhow, if you haven't read Awake in the Nightland yet, I highly recommend it. Highly recommend it. And then somebody wanted to know who are the other two authors that I consider to be the best in science fiction and fantasy. One is China Miéville. I think he's a great writer. I enjoy. They kind of do the whole like new weird thing, whatever. For me, it's just Miéville trying to find a way to do something original. And I like that and I respect that, and he does it very, very well. Some people say, too bad he's a commie, but come on, look at all the great writers. Half of them are insane, syphilitic drunks. Don't judge the greatness of an author by his politics or by what kind of person he is. You know, the only way that you can judge an author's work is by the work itself. You know, and I would say that even of people like Delaney and Marion Zimmer Bradley, you know, very, very, very bad people, sick people. But you should judge their work on its own. Yes, of course I've read Nietzsche. So the yeah, it's always kind of funny to me when people like say, "You're envious of Scalzi." It's like, you haven't read either. Have you really read either of our books? I'm not envious at all. Let's see. I don't know if I would do a live stream with John like that. You know, John and I respect each other. We have a good relationship. And one of the reasons why we have a good relationship is that we don't spend a lot of time poking at each other. You know, he and I are so far apart when it comes to like a basic perspective on women and that sort of thing. I mean, actually, it was actually in City Beyond Time. At one point, you know, he was doing his rhapsodizing over a woman thing. I mean, no man loves and reveres and respects women more than John C. Wright. Okay? So, anyhow, he was doing his, you know, rhapsodizing over this woman thing, and, you know, going on for pages about how attractive and wonderful she was and all this sort of thing, in his inimitable style, you know. And I called him up. I said, you know, John, you got to cut this out. It's too much. You can't do this, you know. And he's like, no, but this, but that, but I said, you know, John, you can't do the hooker with a heart of gold thing. She's a murderous whore. And he's like, okay, maybe some of the superlatives are a bit much. But, you know, that's just how John goes. You know, he gets on a roll, and you know, and he that just cracked me up. That was like the only time I think that I've ever been able to convince him at all of my perspective, because, you know, he really does not like my you know, my theory of game perspective. You know, of the female attraction to the dark triad and all that kind of stuff. So, you know, we have very different perspectives, and that's great. You know, I have tremendous respect for the man. I think he's one of the, you know, best writers out there, and I consider being able to edit his work both a privilege as well as a responsibility. So, but anyhow, somebody asked a question. What's the best way to get into my work? It depends. I mean, if you like science fiction, then I would recommend that you read A Man Disrupted, Quantum Mortis. It's actually been compared, you know, pretty favorably to Larry Correa's stuff, just in terms of action and whatnot. It has, I'm told that it has the first impromptu eye surgery in the course of an arrest ever written. I have no idea when the next one is. I'm much more focused on Selenoth right now. But that's not bad if you like science fiction. If you like fantasy, then, you know, really you should read A Throne of Bones and A Sea of Skulls. If you want the shorter stuff first, Summa Helvetica is a much shorter novel, and it has something like 8 novellas and short stories in it that are all set in the same world. So it's just kind of a question of whether you want to dive in. You know, if you like Robert Jordan, if you like George Martin, if you like Lord of the Rings, well, I mean, everybody likes Lord of the Rings, so that's almost meaningless. But if you like big fat fantasy books, I would definitely say just start with The Throne of Bones. And so, Yeah, I've read the original Summa. I mean, if you read Summa Helvetica, here's a funny story about Summa Helvetica. Summa Helvetica, I originally planned to I created an argument, and the whole book is basically the Sanctif trying to decide whether elves have souls or not. This is a major decision for them. And so I created a fake Aquinas argument, which I then had translated into Latin, talking about this. It was basically doing the typical Aquinas thing of saying that elves do not have souls naturally united to them, and then producing the reason arguments against it, and then saying, but on the other hand, and so forth. What was funny is that Blackgate reviewed it, and the author thought it was very clever how I had worked Aquinas's arguments into the text. And I said, well, I was talking to the editor, John O'Neill, later about that, and I said, hey, I wanted to say thank you for that really kind review. I was glad the author, or glad the reviewer enjoyed it, and so forth. Just one thing, that argument is not an Aquinas argument. I made it up. And he said, well, are you sure? He said, because it really sounds like an Aquinas argument. I said, well, yeah, I'm pretty sure Thomas Aquinas never debated the issue of whether elves have souls. So he admitted that this was a compelling point. So, but anyhow, so that's Summa Helvetica is actually involves the same involves one of the perspective characters. The protagonist is one of the perspective characters in Throne of Bones and Sea of Skulls, and it also features several characters who appear in A Throne of Bones and Sea of Skulls, one or two of whom are perspective characters. Some of them do. Some of them do, some of them don't. There's 114 of them? 1,014, whatever it is, I can't remember. Anyhow, but I should get going. Thanks for putting up with my rambling. Sometimes it's just fun to talk about books. I know it's not quite as exciting as who did what to whom and what the God Emperor is going to do next, but anyhow, if you get a chance, one more thing. If you want to read a excerpt from City Beyond Time, I posted one on the blog tonight, and so check out, if you go to VoxDay.blogspot.com, there's actually a nice little selection from one of the stories in City Beyond Time. So have a good evening, and we'll see you soon.